Hello everyone, my name is Mayuso. I'd like to say that it's a great pleasure to talk to you again, and I hope you're well, whatever you are in the world, all right? So just remind you that each 15 days gonna have this session, and the goal is to talk about from any aspect of HEFLO, all right? So let's get started. So last week or last session, we received a message from a user asking how to use the data external. It's a field on HEFLO, all right? And the idea of this session is to explain how to use it. So in order to create this example, I'm gonna use this public API, all right? As you can see, we have this host, we call this first part host, and gonna use this list users that represent a list of users on this API. I'm gonna explain to you the most important part to us is in this, of course, in this configuration is gonna be the page, the and the parameter per page, and the other ones, of course, data, ID, and the other ones it could be ID, email, first name, and last name, and so on. And I'm gonna explain how to configure this part on HEFLO, all right? So let's go back to the process. Uh, let's create a field, new. Let's put managers, for example. It's gonna be the name of my field, all right? And select the external data, configure data source. On this part, I'm gonna put a name to represent this list of options that I'm gonna return on this field. It could be, I'm gonna use hack, the same name of the website that I'm using an example. I'm gonna put the URL, I'm gonna copy this one, go back to the URL. Perfect. It's not necessary to use the slash in the end of the host part. I'm gonna do the same to the test URL because I'm gonna run some tests on the process editor. That's why it's important to use the test URL as well. The method, as you can see, it's a get method on this website. They are not using the authentication type. In this case, I'm gonna use none, and then I'm gonna confirm. And the source that gonna use, as you can see on the request part, we have some options, API/users, and the other part. I'm gonna use just this part, the API/users, just to see some configuration. Perfect. I have this slash is necessary, that's why it's necessary to put the slash in the end of the host part, right? I'm gonna copy this API users slash users. Sorry, users. Perfect. This part is really important. All right. To this example, they're not using the parameter filter. As you can see on this implementation, we can see anything related to the filter part, but they use the page, the pagination. This pagination is important because imagine that you have a lot of data, right? And try to display on that field the whole information, probably gonna have a timeout. That's why it's really important to use the pagination approach on your implementation. But of course, this part is to relate it to the develop team that's gonna create the API and return the data. All right. So for this example, I'm gonna use some parameters here as well. The pagination parameter that are represented on this data is page. I'm gonna use page, and the page per page is called per page, right? This parameter of items per page. Use this one here. Any parameters, they are not using any parameters. You can see they are using page, but I'm already using this part here. Okay. And to response handler, I'm gonna use this information. For example, on this extractor, you can see that they are using data to represent a list of information. It's the same on HEFLO. is not required, as you can see. And then I'm going to use the ID that represents the same column, the same parameter. And then I'm going to use, for example, the first name. Perfect. Now let's confirm and see the result. We're gonna create a test item and try to select the information. Perfect. As you can see, it's working. I'm getting the data from this website. Of course, they are using pagination. On the first part, I just can see some information, but when I scroll down, I can see the other ones, as you can see. All right. George, Janet, Emma, Eve, Charles. Anyway, the whole information that I getting from this website. As I explained before, it's important to use pagination because imagine that you have a 1,000 million data or records to return on this field. Probably gonna have a timeout problem, all right? Because it's not interesting to return this amount of data, and it's really required to use this logic on your implementation. But this, of course, I'm talking to the develop team that probably gonna be responsible for creating this API in your company, all right? But in order to use here, it's pretty easy. It's not necessary to do any more step than I've done here, all right? I'd like to show another approach as well. Let's just access the previous one. Remember that I said you that they're not using the search parameters. Then when I come here, type, for example, Janet, nothing is gonna happen, all right? Because on your implementation, they're not using this filter. But I'm gonna use another API, it's a local API, that in this case, I'm gonna use this parameter in order to filter the name that I'm typing, all right? In order to do that, I'm gonna create another field. For example, I called list user manager. I'm gonna call manager 2. Okay. Managers, sorry. Managers 2. Just to illustrate this part. Unfortunately, it's not possible to use the same host because I'm gonna change it's a local host in this case, all right? That's why I can't use, but for example, it's normal that you keep the host and just change the source, all right? It's very common to do that. It's necessary to always create a new external data, use another host. I can keep the same host, of course, it depends of your structure, but generally I just need to create one host and just change the resource, all right? But in this case, I'm gonna change the host. That's why I'm gonna create a new one. Okay, manager 2. Gonna click here. I'm gonna call hack 2. All right, and then I'm gonna use my local API. I'm gonna use the AnyGrok to simulate my computer. It's a technical explanation. You don't need to worry about it, right? The same method. I'm gonna use the authentication type as well. Confirm. The source that I'm using, just a moment, it's gonna be manager as well. Perfect. But in this case, I'm use the parameter filter, and then you're gonna see the difference. I'm use, for example, the pagination parameter page, but it could be page 1, page 2, doesn't matter, of course, okay? But it's important that in your implementation, you have the same parameter. Doesn't make sense to have page another name here and your implementation has a different name, right? So the same parameter of item per page. I'm not using this send parameter as well, but in my implementation, just use the ID parameter and text parameter name. I'm not using the list, array list to represent the data in my API. And the parameter that I'm gonna return is ID and the name It's gonna be text as well. I'm gonna confirm, and let's see if we have two ways to test this configuration. You can test it here on this interface. Perfect, it's already working. But you can, for example, create a new test instance and see the same result. But the difference here, for example, when I type Mary, you're gonna filter, all right, by the information that I type on the field. This is gonna be useful to the final user because they can use this feature in order to have more specific information when you type and in filter and so on. It's more useful, all right? So I believe that's all for now. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.